The air in the old Blackwood Manor Hotel was always heavy, thick with the scent of aged wood, dust, and something else, something indescribable, a lingering whisper of forgotten things. But on that particular Tuesday, as the clock on the grand lobby mantelpiece struck midnight, the air did just feel heavy. It vibrated with a chilling resonance, a sound that sliced through the mundane hum of the building like a razor. It began as a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, a low thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very foundations of the structure. Then, it grew, slowly, inexorably, coalescing into a sound that no living soul should ever have to hear. It was a cry, not a human scream of pain or fear or anger, but something far more primal, far more ancient. It was a sound that spoke of utter despair, of a soul ripped apart, an echo of a tragedy so profound that it had etched itself into the very fabric of the building. Evelyn, the night receptionist, a woman whose cynicism was as worn and comfortable as her cardigan, felt the cry deep in her bones. Her fingers, usually nimble as they typed out late check-ins, froze mid-air above the keyboard. Her breath hitched in her throat, a cold knot forming in her stomach. She wasn't one for ghost stories. She'd heard them all in her 20 years at Blackwood Manor, dismissed them all with a weary sigh and a knowing roll of her eyes. But this was different. This was the wind whistling through a broken pane, or the creak of old pipes. This was a sound that had weight, a presence that pressed down on her, suffocating her with its sorrow. The cry pulsed through the silent lobby, seeming to radiate from a single ominous source. Room 13. Room 13. Room 13. Even the number held a morbid fascination for the few guests brave enough to ask about it. It was the only room in the entire hotel that Evelyn had never seen rented, not in her 2 decades of service. The door, a dark, heavy oak, always remained shut, adorned with a tarnished brass. 13, that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural coldness. There were stories, of course, whispered by new hires and curious guests. Stories of a young woman, a guest named Elara, who had checked in decades ago and simply vanished. No trace, no farewell, just an empty room and a lingering sense of wrongness. The official police report cited disappearance under suspicious circumstances, but the whispers in the hotel always suggested something far more sinister. Something that the police, with their earthly methods, could never comprehend. Evelyn remembered the first time she'd heard the cry. It was years ago, a particularly stormy night. She dismissed it then as the wind, as the rattling of old windows. But the sound had returned, sporadically at first, then with increasing frequency, always from room 13, always in the dead of night, always carrying that same unbearable weight of sorrow. Tonight, however, it was louder, more urgent, more desperate. It was as if whatever had been confined within room 13 was now straining against its invisible bonds, its pain manifesting as this unearthly wail. The old gas lamps in the lobby flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and contort with the sound. The framed portraits of stern-faced Blackwood ancestors on the walls seemed to stare down at her with knowing, mournful eyes. Evelyn knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that tonight, something was different. The cry from room 13 was no longer just an echo. It was a desperate plea, a terrifying invitation, and she felt an undeniable, morbid pull towards it. She had to know. She had to understand the source of this profound, ancient grief. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped within a cage of bone. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to lock herself in the manager's office, to call the police, though she knew they would only dismiss her fears as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman. But the cry, it held her captive. It wasn't just a sound. It was a siren song of anguish, a raw, exposed nerve ending of sorrow that resonated with a forgotten empathy deep within her. It pulled her forward, one hesitant step after another, down the long, carpeted hallway, towards the source of the torment. The silence of the hotel, usually a comforting blanket, now felt like a suffocating shroud, amplifying every creak of the floorboards beneath her worn shoes. Every frantic beat of her own pulse. The air grew colder with each step, a biting chill that seeped into her bones, making her teeth chatter despite herself. The ornate wallpaper, usually a tapestry of faded grandeur, now seemed to twist and distort in the dim light, the floral patterns morphing into grotesque, weeping faces. As she approached the corridor leading to room 13, a strange, metallic scent filled the air. A faint, almost imperceptible tang of old blood and rust, mixed with the musty odor of decay. It wasn't overpowering, but it was enough to send a fresh wave of nausea through her. The lights in this section of the hallway flickered with alarming intensity, casting jumpy, monstrous shadows that danced ahead of her, teasing her with fleeting glimpses of things that weren't there. Then, she saw it. The door to room 13. It stood at the very end of the corridor, a dark sentinel against the gloom. The brass 13 on its surface seemed to glow with a faint internal luminescence, almost pulsing in time with the cry that now filled the entire hallway. The sound was no longer distant. It was right there, pressing against the heavy oak, a raw, guttural moan that seemed to resonate directly inside her skull. It was a sound beyond human capacity, yet undeniably born of human suffering. Evelyn reached the door, her hand trembling as she hesitantly extended it towards the cold wood. Her fingers brushed against the tarnished brass plate, and a jolt, not quite electric, but a surge of profound cold, shot up her arm. It was as if the door itself was imbued with the despair it contained. The cry intensified, seeming to rise in pitch, transforming from a mournful wail into a desperate, almost pleading gasp. It sounded like a suffocating breath, like a final, agonizing exhalation. And then, for the first time, Evelyn heard words, faint and broken, woven into the fabric of the cry. They were whispers, almost unintelligible, but she could make out fragments. Help me. Trapped, alone. The words were barely audible, lost within the overwhelming sorrow of the cry. But they were there, undeniable, chilling her to the absolute core. This wasn't just some lingering energy. This was a conscious, suffering entity, trapped within that cursed room. A fresh wave of terror washed over Evelyn, mingling with a powerful, almost maternal urge to help. The old stories about Ilara, the vanished guest, resurfaced in her mind. Was this Ilara? Was this her spirit, forever imprisoned, reliving her final moments of terror? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but it also solidified her resolve. She couldn't just stand there and listen to this torment. She had to do something. She fumbled in her cardigan pocket for her master keycard, her fingers clumsy with fear. The card, usually a mundane object, felt heavy and ominous in her hand. She slid it into the reader next to the door, the small green light blinking hesitantly before turning solid. A faint click echoed from within the lock. The door was no longer impenetrable. It was open. And as the latch disengaged, the cry from within room 13 intensified once more, transforming into a cacophony of choked sobs and heart-wrenching pleas. Evelyn took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the sliver of darkness revealed by the slightly ajar door. What lay beyond that threshold? What unspeakable horror had been trapped in room 13 all these years? She pushed the door open further, stepping into the blackness, drawn by an irresistible, terrifying compassion. The darkness within room 13 was unlike any Evelyn had ever encountered. It wasn't merely the absence of light. It was a palpable, living entity, a suffocating blanket that seemed to absorb all sound, all hope, all warmth. As she stepped across the threshold, the cry, which had been so overwhelmingly loud moments before, suddenly muted, becoming a soft, mournful hum that vibrated through the floorboards beneath her feet. The scent of rust and decay intensified, thick and cloying, making her gag. She fumbled along the wall, searching for a light switch, her hand brushing against damp, peeling wallpaper. The air was heavy, stagnant, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. And yet, a faint, icy breeze seemed to whisper around her, raising goosebumps on her arms. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence. She tried to call out, to ask, "Hello?" But her voice caught in her throat, a dry, strangled gasp. It was as if the room itself was silencing her, preventing any sound that wasn't its own sorrowful lament. Finally, her fingers connected with a cold, metallic toggle switch. With a desperate flick, a single, bare bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling flickered to life, casting a sickly yellow glow that did little to dispel the oppressive gloom. The sight that greeted Evelyn stole her breath. This wasn't just a forgotten hotel room. It was a time capsule of terror, frozen in a moment of profound despair. The room was sparsely furnished, a relic of a bygone era. A four-poster bed, its canopy draped in tattered velvet, dominated the center, the mattress sunken and stained. A heavy wooden wardrobe stood against one wall, its doors slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of moth-eaten fabrics. Dust motes danced in the weak light, thick as snow, covering every surface in a grimy, suffocating layer. But it was the details that truly twisted Evelyn's stomach. On the bedside table, a half-empty teacup sat next to a tarnished silver locket, its chain broken. A single, faded photograph lay face down beside it. Evelyn's gaze was drawn to the walls. They were not merely damp and peeling. They were covered in scrawled markings, faint at first, but becoming clearer as her eyes adjusted. They weren't graffiti. They were desperate scratches, lines and symbols etched into the plaster, as if someone had been trying to claw their way out. And amidst these desperate etchings, one word appeared again and again, scrawled in what looked suspiciously like dried blood. Alone. The word pulsed with an agonizing sorrow, each letter a testament to profound, unending isolation. The source of the cry became clearer now. It wasn't a physical presence, not a spectral figure haunting the bed. It was the room itself. The sorrow, the despair, the overwhelming sense of abandonment. It had imprinted itself into the very walls, the very air. It was a resonance of Alara's final moments, a psychic echo of her suffering, trapped and amplified within the confines of room 13. As Evelyn stood there, paralyzed by the chilling reality of it all, the mournful hum intensified once more. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, a symphony of suffering that filled the small space. The air grew impossibly cold, and a sickening feeling of dread washed over her, far more potent than any fear she had ever known. She felt an invisible presence close around her, a suffocating embrace of sorrow. It was then that she saw it. In the periphery of her vision, a subtle movement near the window, a faint shimmer, like heat haze, coalescing into something indistinct, something almost translucent. It was not a full apparition, but a flicker, a ripple in the fabric of reality. It was a silhouette of a woman, slender and ethereal, standing by the window, her head bowed in profound grief. She wasn't solid, but her sorrow was. It radiated from her, cold and heavy, a palpable weight that settled onto Evelyn's shoulders. Evelyn knew, with a horrifying certainty, that she was not alone in room 13. She had walked directly into the heart of Alara's eternal torment. Evelyn stood transfixed, her breath caught in her throat, her eyes fixed on the shimmering silhouette by the window. The ethereal figure of the woman, barely more than a distortion in the air, radiated an intense, profound sorrow that was almost suffocating. It wasn't menacing, not aggressive, but utterly heartbroken. A grief so deep it had solidified into a spectral presence. The faint, mournful hum that had filled the room now seemed to be emanating directly from her. A continuous lament, the very source of the cry from room 13. Evelyn could feel the raw emotion, a wave of despair washing over her, threatening to pull her down into its depths. She knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was Alara, the vanished guest, forever trapped within the confines of this cursed room, reliving her final, agonizing moments. As Evelyn watched, a strange phenomenon began to unfold. The room, which had been static and frozen in time, began to ripple, as if she were looking through distorted glass. The dust motes swirling in the weak light seemed to coalesce, forming fleeting, ghostly images, fragments of memories, echoes of the past, began to play out around her, a horrific tableau of Alara's final hours. She saw a younger, vibrant Alara, her face etched with a mixture of fear and defiance, standing in the very spot where the silhouette now stood. She was arguing with a shadowy, indistinct figure, a man whose features remained frustratingly blurred, but whose presence exuded a menacing authority. Their voices, though silent, resonated within Evelyn's mind, a chaotic jumble of unspoken words and rising tension. Evelyn could almost hear the shouts, the accusations, the desperate pleas. The scene shifted, becoming more vivid, more horrifying. Alara was backed against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. The shadowy figure advanced, his hand raised. Evelyn flinched, instinctively recoiling, though she knew she was witnessing a phantom memory. The room grew colder, the scent of rust and decay intensifying to an unbearable degree. Then, the silence was shattered by a psychic scream, not audible to her ears, but resonating deep within her skull, a piercing shriek of pure agony and despair. It was the cry, the very cry that had haunted Blackwood Manor for decades, now raw and unadulterated, reverberating through her very being. The image of Ilara twisted, her face contorted in a silent scream, her body collapsing to the floor. The shadowy figure stooped over her. And then, a horrifying, sickening realization dawned on Evelyn. The faint metallic smell. The dried blood scrawled on the walls. Ilara hadn't simply vanished. She had been murdered. And her body, Evelyn instinctively knew, was still here, hidden somewhere within this very room, eternally binding her spirit to this place of torment. The truth, when it came, was a crushing blow. The hotel, her livelihood, her familiar, mundane existence, was built upon a foundation of profound injustice and unspeakable horror. The cry was not just a lament for her lost life, but a desperate call for justice, for release. The spectral figure of Ilara, now lying on the floor, began to fade, slowly dissolving into the swirling dust, leaving behind only the lingering, crushing weight of her despair. The mournful hum softened again, becoming a weary sigh, a testament to her unending torment. Evelyn felt a profound sense of anguish, not just for Ilara, but for the innocent lives that had surely crossed the threshold of this cursed room, unknowingly stepping into the lingering echo of her violent end. She looked at the blood-like scratches on the wall, the word alone, now imbued with a far deeper, more chilling meaning. Ilara had tried to communicate, to warn, to leave a trace. A desperate plea for someone to discover her truth. And now, Evelyn had. The realization weighed heavily on her. She had unearthed a tragedy, a forgotten horror, and with it came a responsibility. She couldn't just leave Ilara to her eternal torment. She had to act. She had to expose the truth, even if it meant risking everything she knew, everything she believed. The cry from room 13 was no longer just a sound of despair. It was a call to arms, a mandate for justice. The revelation of Ilara's murder ignited a fire within Evelyn, pushing past her terror, past her ingrained cynicism, and replacing it with a burning sense of purpose. The overwhelming despair of room 13 still clung to her, a chilling shroud, but it no longer paralyzed her. Instead, it fueled a fierce determination. Ilara, the unseen victim, the silent screen, deserved justice. Evelyn knew the hotel staff, the police, the local authorities would dismiss her claims as the ravings of a lonely old woman, especially with no tangible proof. But she had seen, she had felt, she had experienced the truth of room 13. She could let Ilara's torment continue, not after witnessing her final moments, not after hearing her desperate, eternal cry. Her gaze swept across the room again, now with a new, investigative intensity. She wasn't just a night receptionist anymore. She was a detective, compelled by the spectral plea of a murdered soul. She meticulously examined the floorboards near where Ilara's spectral form had collapsed. The wood was old, warped, and stained in various places, but one section seemed slightly different. A subtle discoloration that hinted at something more than just age. With trembling hands, Evelyn knelt, running her fingers along the dusty planks. One particular board felt loose, almost imperceptibly so. She pressed down on it, then tried to pry it up with her fingernails, but it wouldn't budge. She needed a tool. Her mind raced. The utility closet downstairs. It had a crowbar, a sturdy one. Ignoring the renewed chill that swept through the room, ignoring the faint, mournful hum that seemed to intensify with her investigation, Evelyn hurried out of room 13, leaving the door ajar. The silence of the hallway now felt different. It was expectant, tense. She practically ran to the utility closet, grabbed the crowbar, and raced back, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Back in room 13, the bare bulb still cast its sickly glow. Evelyn took a deep breath, positioned the crowbar, and with a grunt of effort, began to pry at the loose floorboard. The wood groaned in protest, sending splinters flying. But with a final, sickening crack, it came free. Beneath the floorboard, in the shallow cavity of the old hotel, lay a small, leather-bound journal. It was old, brittle with age, but perfectly preserved, tucked away in the darkness. Next to it, glinting dully in the dim light, was a tarnished silver ring, engraved with the initials E. Alara Vance. Evelyn's hands trembled as she retrieved the journal. Dusting it off, she opened it to the first page. The delicate, elegant handwriting was undeniably Alara. The entries detailed her relationship with a wealthy, influential man named Arthur Blackwood, the original owner's son, a man renowned in local history for his philanthropic endeavors and spotless reputation. But Alara's words painted a different picture. A manipulative, cruel man who had seduced her, promised her marriage, and then, upon discovering her pregnancy, had brutally murdered her to protect his reputation and inheritance. The final entry was a desperate plea, written in a shaky hand, describing her fear, her betrayal, and the knowledge that Arthur intended to silence her forever in room 13. The journal was the undeniable proof Evelyn needed. It was a voice from the grave, a testament to a monstrous injustice hidden for decades. With the journal clutched tightly in her hand, Evelyn felt a profound sense of calm wash over her. The mournful hum in the room began to subside, slowly fading, replaced by a subtle shift in the air. A feeling of release. Alara's spirit, after so many years of torment, finally found a measure of peace. Evelyn knew the road ahead would be difficult. Unraveling a decades-old murder, especially one involving a prominent family, would be an uphill battle. But she had the truth, and she had the journal. She would take it to the authorities. She would fight for Alara. As she stepped out of room 13, leaving the journal and the ring on the bedside table for now, she paused, looking back at the now quiet room. The darkness within still lingered, but the oppressive despair was gone. The cry, the chilling, soul-wrenching cry, was finally silent. Evelyn closed the door to room 13. No longer a tomb of despair, but a monument to a truth finally unearthed. The Blackwood Manor Hotel would never be the same. And neither would Evelyn. She had faced the unseen, confronted a forgotten horror, and in doing so, had finally brought peace to the lost soul of Alara. The cry from room 13 was no more, but its silent echo of justice would resonate forever.